Hello and welcome everyone. I'm David Reyes, Curator of Exhibitions and Collections for the Huntsville Museum of Art, and I'm here today with my colleague, Catherine Purvis, Registrar for the museum. We're pleased to host the museum's 10th virtual artist talk and studio visit in connection with the exhibition, We the People, Portraits of Veterans in America by Mary Whyte, which is currently on view at the museum through September 26, 2021. Thank you all for joining us. We the People presents a stunning collection of 50 portraits of military veterans, one from each state. The subjects for each portrait come from many walks of life and from every branch of service. While some are still on active duty, most have returned to civilian life, retaining the experiences that shaped their lives while in service. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, the Jurenko Foundation, and lead sponsor, the Boeing Company, along with our additional exhibition sponsors for helping to make this exhibition possible. I would also like to remind everyone that during the course of this program, you can use your Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in questions as we proceed, since we will want to get to some of your questions during the session. And now I'll hand over the program to Catherine Purvis, who will introduce today's artist, Mary Whyte. Catherine?
Thank you. Mary Whyte is an American artist known internationally for her watercolor portraits of contemporary people painted in a realistic style. In the exhibition, We the People, which is currently on view, she uses tight details combined with loose brushwork and shows great care in her treatment of visual settings where these characters exist, providing clues to their personality or mental state. This approach leads to not only an excellent likeness of the subject, but a feeling of understanding some aspect of that person's life. Whyte was born in 1953 in Cleveland, Ohio, and attended Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia, where she graduated with honors in 1976 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and a teaching certification. Her work has been exhibited in many galleries and museums across the US, and particularly in the Southeastern region. In 2013, Whyte was one of 10 artists worldwide invited to travel to China and exhibit her watercolors at the Nanning Art Museum in Nanning. Her art has been featured in many international publications in China, Russia, France, Germany, Canada, and Taiwan. Her paintings are in private, corporate, university, and public collections nationwide and have been featured in numerous media outlets, including CBS Sunday Morning, PBS, and NPR. She is the author of 7 books and has provided illustrations for a number of children's books. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Portrait Society of America's Gold Medal, the Carolinas Freedom Foundation's Freedom Award, and the South Carolina Governor's Award for the Arts, South Carolina's highest honor in the arts. In 2021, Mary Whyte received an honorary doctorate degree from Converse University in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Please join me in welcoming Mary Whyte. Mary, now to you.
Hello, everyone. Gosh, it's great to be here. And thank you for that nice introduction. I'm Mary Whyte, and I'm talking to you from my studio in Charleston, South Carolina. It's an old 1840s house, antebellum, and I use it for where I show my work to collectors and where I do the actual painting here. And I'm seated right now in what was the dining room, which I use as sort of a display room for paintings. You can see some of them behind me on the wall. And if I just turn it a little bit, you can see a few more here in the room. And of course, I like to also surround myself with personal things too. So over there, you can see a silver tea set that my grandmother gave me when I graduated from high school. I have yet to make tea in it, and you can see that I instead use it for holding my paintbrushes. So I'll take you into the next room, and then I'll take you up to my studio and show you where I work here. So I use what we used to call the drawing room or the sitting room. I use this also as a showroom here. And I will turn this around so you can see how the room is laid out here. There's, of course, high ceilings, as was very traditional in those days. There's a porch, and in back, there's a wonderful little courtyard back there. You can see some paintings up on the wall there, the painting on the mantle, and a nice display in here. And of course, some back here on the easel here too. So this is where I greet I greet the collectors and show them what I have that's available for them, that's either not in storage or out on exhibition. So now let me take you upstairs where I do the real work. So I go up the stairs here, and here I'm in the entranceway. I'm going to go right up these stairs here, and you'll see why I just love this studio. As a watercolorist, I don't need too much space here because all the framing and the shipping and the management paperwork is all done someplace else. But I love this place up here because I've got my own little sitting deck patio right out here off the second floor. And this is my studio that we're going into right now. It's a room that's, it's got windows on 3 sides here. You can see it's really just light filled. And I love it because even on a cloudy day, it's a great room to work in here. I've got, in this room, I keep paintings that are in progress or that I've just finished, unframed works. You can see a bookcase behind me. And then the mantle area, I'll show this to you. This is where I often just prop little studies. Often works that are maybe a study for a painting to come, but a lot of them too are just plein air pieces, paintings done on location. That one right there in the middle is one that I just finished a few days ago up in Maine, standing out on the street. Others are from trips to the Grand Canyon with my husband Arnie, or another trip back to Maine recently. And then this area over here, this is really where I do the painting over here on this side of the room because of the bank of windows that are behind me. And I'll show you, I can show you that too. And you can see that there's a lot of light that comes in here, a piece on the easel right here that I've been working on of a woman with chickens. I like to tack, you can see just above it there, some studies there. I tack those around the painting as I'm working. And of course, behind me too, you can see the other pieces on the mantle. And then where I post my ideas, I'll spin this around so you can see. This is what I call my idea wall behind me here. This is where I put sketches of works to come. I put lists of paintings that I've done or that I want to do, ideas that I'm putting together. And so I keep them there just sort of front and center so that I can always have in mind what it is I want to do and many ideas to come as well. Mm-hmm. So that's really, that's my studio. And it's not, again, it's not a big space, but it has what's most important to me, and that is great light to work from. And also great, out here over on the corner here, I have a great view of a corner of 2 streets here meeting in Charleston. So with the opportunity, I've done several paintings recently of the carriage horses coming by. Oh, right now, David, I know that you wanted to show some works and talk about We the People.
Yeah. Thank you so much for touring us through this fantastic creative space that you have. It must be such a treat to, work in that space every day with the beautiful light. And I'm sure you had an opportunity to revel in that space while you were creating the work for We the People. This is a 7-year-long project. And I'm sure that you had a time to spend a lot of time and enjoy that space quite a bit. Today, we're going to talk about a select number of works from that exhibition, from We the People, that has garnered interest and generated questions from our visitors. We asked our docents, docents are our museum volunteers who lead groups on tours of the exhibition. We've asked our staff and even our security guards what artworks visitors have commented on or are intrigued by when they come and visit the museum and visit We the People. And we're going to try to learn a little bit more about some of those works here today. So we're going to start off with this first piece, which is Bouillabaisse. Of course, the show is a painting of one veteran from each state. And so this piece here, Bouillabaisse, is from the state of Alabama. And of course, visitors are very curious to know more about this work, about Wendy, the subject of this, and I'm curious as to how this monumental task of selecting a person to represent a state. How did Wendy come to be the representative of Alabama?
Well, I knew that I wanted to paint this all-encompassing portrait of America that would be all-inclusive so that you could bring all these paintings together and you could say, yes, that is a true representation of our country and the people that live in our country. And so I started by making a list of all the different kinds of Americans, our veterans, that I wanted to include. I mean, everything from an astronaut to a homeless man, tattoo artist, dairy farmer, food truck operator, lobstermen, and all these different kinds of Americans. And one of them that I had on that list was a chef. And I knew that I wanted to include, because there's so many, restaurant workers in this country. And so when I was in Alabama, I was actually staying in Birmingham for a while, and I made a lot of phone calls to restaurants and resorts, and was able to finally find Wendy, who served in the Army, and it later became a very accomplished chef.
Great. I think we have a question here, Catherine.
Yes, we do. Barbara is asking, how did you get that smoky look in this painting?
I get that. Barbara must be an artist, because that's a question that a lot of artists will ask of me. In watercolors, many of you know, we generally don't use white paint. So wherever you see white, for instance, the white of her shirt, the white plates, the white of the steam, that's not paint, that's actually the paper. So generally I work upright, but to paint something like steam, I lay the board down so it's almost flat. And there in that area, I puddled in a lot of water and then charged in the darker colors around the perimeter there to give the effect of steam.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for answering our question. And thank you very much, audience, for asking questions. I think we're going to move to our next piece. All right. Excellent. So this piece, for those of you who have not had a chance to see the exhibition, you really do need to see this piece in person. This piece has gotten a lot of positive response from the public. Visitors just love this guy's smile and love, Mary, how you're able to convey the feelings of happiness and joy in this sitter's face. This is an extremely large piece, probably one of the largest in the exhibition, at 5 foot tall and over 6.5 feet wide. What kind of challenges do you face when working at this scale?
Well, in watercolor, watercolor is the only medium of all of them that relies strictly on timing. So that if you want a soft edge, like if you look at where the ear and the hat sort of blend into the background to make them look like they're a little bit further away from the viewer, that all has to be done in one go so that those edges are soft and kind of melt together that way. So with that in mind, I have to use a much bigger brush. Here's two of my brushes here, right here. I have to use these bigger brushes, mix up the big washes, and then fill it in pretty quickly, and working very quickly that way. And this is a man we all got to know him and got calling him Uncle Hank. He served in World War II, Coast Guard. And sometimes I know how I'm going to want to paint the person, and other times it changes. And I thought I was going to do a painting of him kind of tending the backyard where he grows these huge tomatoes. But this was the way he was. He would just come right up to my face, and I just thought, well, that's how I'm going to paint him. This big, happy face with this beat up hat and the dappled light coming through onto his skin.
Now, we have another question from Beverly. She would like to know how detailed your drawings are.
Well, before I start painting, that's a great question. I do draw in pencil, just a number 2 school pencil right onto the paper, and I'll draw the shapes I see or think I see. For instance, not just like, for instance, the shape of the eye, but I might draw, for instance, the shape of where you see like a highlight on his chin or that little bit of light patch on the nose. I'll draw that out so I don't miss that later. So I might spend if it's a quick sketch, out like the plein air paintings I just showed you on that I'm doing on location, where the whole painting takes me maybe an hour and a half at the most, I might just sketch for 5 minutes. But on something like this, that's, I want to make sure I get the placement of the eyes and the wrinkles and everything in correctly. I probably would spend probably about 3 or 4 hours drawing it in.
Okay, and I have one other question from Lori, wondering how you got this dappled light effect on the face.
That's actually the paper there. That's, sort of painting around those light areas and then coming back with a stiff damp brush and just softening those edges so that the dappled light wouldn't have a hard edge to it. So there's really, I did use a little bit of gouache in this where you can see the eyebrows, but where you see those light patches coming through onto his face, that's the paper that I've painted around.
It's amazing when I look at this piece, those sort of blue highlights that are in there, it almost looks like chalk pastel has been used. So it's a really interesting, really interesting technique and effect that's coming about. And the hyper detail. I mean, I love the fact that there's actually a couple of nose hairs coming out of this. So it's, painting the subject, warts and all. But again, just that joy that comes through really is wonderful in this piece. Let's see, why don't we go on to our next piece? So your titles are key components to your work. Many visitors want to know what the meaning of truce has for this piece.
Yes, the titles are important to me. In fact, I like to have a painting titled right from the beginning, so I know where I'm heading. This is Dan, who was a Marine, and he served in Vietnam during the worst of the conflict in the late '60s, and actually, witnessed the very worst of it. And he actually carried into these conflict areas. He actually carried a Polaroid camera with him. And when I met him, and I actually stayed with him and his wife in their home way up in northern Minnesota. And later that evening after dinner, he brought out this scrapbook of these photos he had taken. I mean, really just unspeakable scenes. And later that night, when he had gone to bed and his wife and I had stayed up talking, she said to me, Mary, he has hardly ever brought that scrapbook out for anyone to see. And so, of course, Dan, like many of our veterans, had some issues with PTSD, and the VA stepped up and they helped to train him to become a taxidermist, and so he later became an expert at it. And so you can see on the tree behind him, I've got these deer antlers behind him, and having him sort of turned and with this pose, where in real life it was actually summertime when he posed for me, but I decided it would have more power if I made this a winter scene. So the title Truce is really sort of a coming to terms of Dan with his service to our country.
Excellent. I've got a follow-up question here. So with the fact that, you've painted veterans from all walks of life, but also from, all forms of service. Some have served during the peacetime military, and some have served, and seen combat experience like Dan. Do you find that veterans who have seen combat are more reticent about sharing their experiences as compared with vets who served during peacetime?
Yeah, I have to say overall, the veterans overall were very modest in wanting to receive any attention or accolades. I think that the veterans as a group that were most reticent to tell me their story were the Vietnam veterans. And yet, on the other hand, the veterans who later, after this show exhibition went up and came to see it, they were the ones that really expressed the most gratitude and thanks and emotion for having done this exhibition.
That's great. That's great. It's great to see, our Vietnam veterans getting that praise that they so richly deserve. let's move on to our next image.
Hmm.
Okay, so this piece is entitled Homeland, and I can't help but see a relationship with Norman Rockwell's The Problem We All Live With, the 1964 painting where a little Black girl is escorted to a recently desegregated school by 4 US Marshals. Um, were you inspired by that work, and how do you see the dynamic between Rockwell's painting and Homeland?
I did think about that painting, Rockwell's painting, after I started this one, and I did remember that, that there is a certain correlation here. Uh, and this is Renee, a sergeant in the police force, and she was also a Marine, very fit woman, and she was able to tour me around Waterbury, Connecticut, where she was in service there with the police, and took me through some pretty rough neighborhoods, one of which she grew up in, and explained to me what that was like. And so I wanted to make this painting with this, this little girl that you could say maybe that was sort of like her when she was young, or maybe this is a nod to the future with a little girl that maybe wants to grow up and also serve her country in some way.
Excellent. I've got a question, kind of knowing, Rockwell and his sort of processes. Could you walk us through sort of a process of how you make a painting like this, like from the technical aspects?
Yes, it all starts with a thumbnail sketch. And in the book that we produced to go along with the exhibition called We the People, on every page where you see the finished painting, opposite of it, you can see the thumbnail sketch, which is really this kind of back of the envelope, initial first fire of an idea in which I'm deciding, okay, this is the feeling I want this painting to have. This is the emotion I want it to get. And so how can I do that? So it starts with a thumbnail sketch, sometimes many thumbnail sketches, until I get the composition that I think best evokes the feeling that I want this to have. And then this is of course after I visited the veteran and gotten a series of sketches and photographs. And so I work from really 4 sources here. I work from live as much as I can. But I also work from photographs. I work from memory, remembering certain elements about the scene. And then I also work from imagination as far as what might have happened, such as with the Armistice painting of Armistice, the boxer. This is a print of the painting here behind me. In real life, she was standing against a white wall. And I thought, what if I make the wall instead of fiery red to get this feeling of heat in it? So then the actual painting, I always work, with the big brush first, the big shapes. Usually the background goes in first. And generally in watercolor, we paint light to dark. But sometimes I get the darks in very early on in the game. So I can just get a sense of that value range or that light to dark range. And I will say too, they don't always work. That I will have to tell you, all of you, the artists that might be listening, that I do tear up one out of probably about every 4 paintings and start it over.
Catherine, I think you had a question.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of questions. So thank you everyone for asking questions, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But Barbara would like to know, how did you find or choose your veterans?
I love that question. It's a question I often get. So how did I find them, knowing that I'm only going to get 1 veteran from each of the states? I started with a list of all these different kinds of veterans that I wanted to paint. And then it was a matter of really just making phone calls. I would call, for instance, the Chamber of Commerce in a small town and say, do you have some veterans working there in interesting jobs? Or searching the internet. And for instance, like the painting I did of a truck driver, I probably made 25 phone calls to different trucking companies in Ohio, because I wanted to have it. That one would be in Ohio, but I also wanted a truck driver that was a woman. So I mean, there was a lot of phone calls and a lot of dead ends too, because nothing there. So it was a matter of phone calls. And I will tell you this too, I wasn't going for veterans that had earned medals and honors. I wanted the everyday average man and woman that raised their hand and said, yes, I will serve.
Great, great. Let's go ahead and move to our next image. Okay, swim. This is, there's a wide variety of textures and level of detail in this piece. Now, how do you decide where to include the very tight details and when to have your loose, open brushwork and washes?
People think of my work as being really detailed when it's really only detailed in places where I want the viewer to focus or to linger. And also in other areas, that are important, like I think if you were just to look at the upper third of this painting, it's really quite abstracted and not much, that we can actually pinpoint and say that's exactly what that is. But that's the feeling that I'm going after. This is Sarah, who is a zookeeper, and her job was to really take care of these sea lions. And when I was there, I actually got into the zoo earlier because I like to walk around and kind of scope out what it is I'm going to paint without people, without other distractions. And I saw her coming along to feed these sea lions, and she had a big bucket and she was tossing fish over, and they just churned up the water. I mean, just dancing and spinning and just all this commotion. And then after a while, now that their bellies were full, they all slowed down, and it was like this kind of this dance, this dream-like state. And so that was the idea. And so I said, Sarah, sit down and lean up against that tank and just put your head back and close your eyes. That's how I want to paint you.
Yeah, that's a great image. It's, well, again, one of those large pieces that's in the exhibition, one of the larger pieces in the exhibition. This is actually one that our security staff really loved this piece. Love that kind of tranquil setting that was.
Well, I love the fact that you asked the security guards, what's your favorite? And because whenever I go to one of the exhibitions, I always talk to the security guards because that's where I get the most information. Because I'll ask them, okay, what are the ones the paintings that they like the best? What are the questions? Because it's the security guards who really get a lot of the questions.
Oh yeah.
So I love hearing from them. So thank you for asking them.
Now, we have a number of questions about the quality of the white in your paintings, questions about if you use mask or gouache, or how do you keep those whites so white?
Well, I would say in 90% of my paintings, the whites that you see, that's the paper that I paint around. In a few of the paintings, I have used gouache, which is it's like an opaque watercolor pigment, such as the painting of the window washer. I did use some white gouache because I thought it better gave the effect of soap suds running down a window. There's other ways you can get whites. You can certainly scrape them back out, but in watercolor, it's once you lose that white, it's lost. So we have to really try and reserve it. I don't use masking fluid very much. I don't have any in my studio right now. I think there may be one or two paintings that I might have used it in the series, but overall, I'm not a big fan of masking fluid because it has such a hard edge to it, a uniform hard edge when you put it down. If I'm going to mask out an area, I'd much rather take little pieces of masking tape and tear them into irregular shapes and put them on the paper and then paint over them, and then later I can lift those off.
Okay. And also, Gina would like to know, how do you know when a painting isn't working out versus when to push through?
Oh, what an interesting question. That reminds me of Andrew Whyte, and I always loved his work growing up, and was always an admirer of his work, and I've read most of the biographies. And he said that he thought all of his best paintings at one point nearly went over the cliff, and he had to fight to pull them back. And I found that true, but there's sometimes you just got to let them go. They're just not working. In watercolor, it's just so easy to to overwork. And so I ask myself in the painting process, am I adding to this painting or am I just fixing? Because if I'm fixing, it's apt to get overworked. And in that case, it's just a piece of paper, you tear it up and you do it again.
Fantastic. Let's go ahead and advance to our next image. So, Mary, this is a bit of a different type of portrait than a number of pieces in the show. This is something that's not showing someone's specific facial features. It's quite a bleak piece in the tone of the coloration or lack thereof, and also the landscape and the fire and smoke that's obviously coming out of it. Can you tell us a little bit about this particular piece? And then I'll have a follow-up question.
Yes, this is Brian, who is a motorcycle hearse transport guy that Brian is the one on the motorcycle. And I was thinking as I was doing these portraits, do I, like in the painting Tomato Pie where you see his face up close, do I always have to show all the features of the face? Can I get a sense of what this person does and have them much smaller in this painting? And so I went to visit him, and he told me all about his service. And as I was leaving his city in Oklahoma there was, and that part of the state's pretty flat. There was a fire way off in the distance that was putting up these big black plumes. And I just thought this was so played into it, like a funeral pyre that gave this whole sort of sense of a funeral or a requiem.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but does Brian just do like veteran transport? Because I see that what appears to be the coffin is draped in the flag.
I'm not sure if he just has a service just for veterans or not. I'm not sure about that. I do know that he also has another job too, but I've seen him in this. It's a very, it seems surprising, a motorcycle hearse. He says he's had widows ride on the back of the motorcycle as they're transporting this hearse to the cemetery, but done with so much dignity and honor.
Excellent, excellent. Let's move on to the next image. Okay, so this piece is literally when I walked into the gallery. Unfortunately, I was not here for the installation. I was out on a medical, but when I came in and saw the show, I was immediately blown away by the work. Every piece that I was going to was just fantastic. But when I came to this piece, Evolution, I was blown away by the various techniques that were being utilized in this piece. Plus, there's something that's humorous. There's something that's a little bit haunting about it. But what really got me was the incredible level of detail and the different sort of visual textures that you have going on in this piece. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this is Richard on the left and Norman on the right. Richard was a high school science teacher, and a teacher in the Pennsylvania, taught science in the Pennsylvania school district. And I went to his classroom and I just knew I had to include this skeleton in this. And so it's a sort of an interesting composition. You could see how I have him almost going out of the painting, and it is a lot of different techniques. You can see this sort of wet into wet technique on the left, where the dark background is sort of painted at the same time as his trousers. Where you see he's holding those white papers, that's really just the white of the paper. I've kind of chiseled around with the brush. Norman is painted mostly with, leaving the paper behind and some of those darks. Where you see the light cinder block, I think if you were to come up closely and take a look at that, you would see my actual fingerprints in there, where I've actually put my hands, here's my palette here. I put my hands right into the palette and kind of just push them into the painting, so I get that sense of kind of dirt and grittiness that a concrete cinder block wall might have. And then for this erase board, to get that smoothness, there I did put in another gouache layer over it. So because sometimes watercolor can be a little granular in its appearance. And boy, it was just so much fun copying his handwriting, getting the effect of the different colors of the markers on a smooth surface. And then just to help it sit in the right place in space by tacking that piece of paper that's hanging there just in front of Norman on the right and a little cast shadow underneath it. That also helps. It's elements like that that also give a sense of depth to a piece.
Yeah, that dry erase board is just amazing to see it up close, because you really do think it really has like that feel of a dry erase board. So again, kudos for that technical achievement. I'm sure that could not
Well,
have
if your viewers look closely at that too, they'll see in the chalkboard my pencil lines.
been great. Love to see those little vestiges of the preliminaries showing through. Let's go ahead and advance to our next image. So this piece has a range of different techniques, but what really strikes me in this one is the use of dark and light, light and shadow in this particular work. And I think it's really an interesting take on how you're portraying a civil servant, the mayor here in Spiral. So could you tell us a little bit about your decisions on the treatment for this particular piece?
Well, this is Anthony, who's the mayor of Harrington, Delaware, and pretty much, wears a white shirt, and trousers to work every day. And I met him in his office, and this is basically, in large part, a desk job. And so as artists, our job is to create something that's appealing to the senses. So how can I get a sense of the job that goes along with being mayor and all these decisions that you have to make all the time with different groups, and still get this, this effect of the man here. So he walked me around the town. We went down the main street and a couple side streets, and there was a doorway that had some grill work, some iron work over the door, and the light was coming through onto the doorway. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So I had him stand in there, and with this interesting shadows that were just sort of going across him, and then on the wall next to him there. So you can see this is a lot of wet into wet. The background, where I painted the background right into his hair, leaving these sort of gashes, and then this sense of this sort of spiral pattern going across him. So in this painting, there's no white paint, where you see the little white whiskers, in his beard. There, I've just with the very tip of the brush, very carefully just sort of painted around those whites, painting those little negatives in there. And leaving, going from light to dark there.
So we have a question from Sandy that asks, if you're sketching for a large piece, how much of your drawing is freehand, and do you use any transfer methods such as projection or other methods?
No, I don't use anything like projection or tracing techniques, anything like that. I don't. Because I think when you do that, that locks you into one thing. And so, I mean, something like this that you're looking at on the screen, there's just no way you could project that to get this kind of looseness or feeling. So I really, and people said, do you use, Photoshop? Well, this is where the Photoshop is. I mean, it's all up here. And I think it's the best Photoshop you could ever have as an artist, because then you're bringing your own ideas, your own reaction to these paintings. And, none of these paintings are exactly what I saw, not one of them, but they are all as close as I could get, using any means that I could, as close as I could get to what I felt. And to me, that ultimately, that's the most important thing as artists.
Now we have another question. Barbara would like to know what order you do this in. Do you focus on the portrait first and then the environment, or how do you do that?
I always work big to little because the biggest shapes set the stage. And so in this case, that big dark background was painted first, and right even into sort of the back of his head, so the back of the head would kind of melt into the background there. So it's always the big shapes first. I never do things like eyes, nose, mouth. That's always a detail. I save that for the end, like dessert. I mean, frankly, that's really the easy part. And the hard part is this big stuff. Those are much bigger hurdles to jump over.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's advance our next image. And actually, this will be our last image here. Before we get to the question and answer session, the general question and answer session. So we have Glory, the docents who have been leading the tours through the museum. They've gotten a lot of comments on this from their tours. Many visitors are intrigued by this lovely image. Many believe that Amelia is singing, and it looks like she's been transported to another realm in this image. Was this an instance where the sitter was singing at the time that you were doing this session?
That's a great question. I'm glad that they had that observation. This is Amelia, who served in World War II. She actually manned post offices for the Tuskegee Airmen. And when since she's recently passed away, but when I went to visit her to photograph her and to do drawings of her, I actually sat at her feet and started just drawing. And I asked her questions about being in the service, what that was like. But then I also asked her, would she like to say the Pledge of Allegiance? And so she puts her hand over her heart and says the Pledge of Allegiance for me. And then she sang, I can't remember if it was the Battle Hymn of the Republic or the National Anthem, but she started to sing. And it just made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And I said, that's the feeling that I want in this painting. So that's the question, that we ask ourselves as artists, is what is the feeling that we want and how we can say more. So yes, it is this feeling of almost levitation of singing by the way that I've placed her hands and there's no chair and she's almost, just coming up on an angle, and even like letting her hair sort of levitate also to help give this feeling.
Fantastic. I've got one more question related to the entire series, and then I think we'll toss it over to the audience for their general questions. This has been an amazing 7-year journey for you to work on this project, to meet all these different veterans. What's your takeaway from this experience, from spending time with these veterans?
I've discovered that God leads us in many ways, and He doesn't always tell us what the plan is until we get past the finish line. And I knew that I wanted to do this project, this real portrait of America, and that it ultimately would be about veterans. But I'm not a veteran, and I don't come from a family of veterans. I mean, I wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in camp, so I'm the least person. But it wasn't until I finished this that I realized that in so many countries, and I wouldn't have been able to do this, as a woman. I traveled by myself mostly, and to be able to paint what I want to paint. I mean, this is something that we can thank our veterans for. And I will say that I was over and over and over again so impressed by our veterans and this cause that they have, for something greater than themselves. That this feeling of doing what is right in service, even if it goes unrecognized or unrecorded, to do this right thing. So I was greatly inspired by our veterans and very grateful to them.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've got a number of questions. And Catherine, do you have a few that we can try to answer?
Sure. Well, there's a lot to choose from here. Let's see. Rosalie would like you to describe your typical painting day.
Well, my typical day, they don't always, as you know, days get derailed, but I like to paint 5 days a week. I often I work get up early, maybe 6:30, and then I go work out, and then I come here to the studio. I spend a little time reading scripture to help me get centered, and then I start painting. And so I'll paint generally up until about maybe 3 o'clock or so, and then I'd like to devote after that to answering emails and the bookkeeping part of being an artist, because there's certainly a lot of that. I will say I'm very fortunate that I have a full-time manager, Sharon Crawford, who really does everything but hold the brush. So that it really frees up a lot of my time to just focus on the work.
Anne is asking, what artists do you admire and provide you with inspiration?
Well, I was first introduced to Andrew Whyte when I was a teenager, and he is and still is a great influence and inspiration to me. But also other watercolor artists, John Singer Sargent and Winslow Homer. I would say those are my three superstars that I frequently refer to. I have many books of theirs around here in my studio that I often refer to. And I've also, learned a lot from them, because when I was in art school, they didn't teach watercolor. It was, always viewed as a lightweight medium. So I really had to learn this on my own by going to the museums or just poring over books. And occasionally I'd be painting a passage and I would say, that looks like a passage that Sargent did in this one painting. I think I might have just cracked the code there, understanding how he would use complementary colors or certain opaque colors into a transparent color. So it was certainly a lot of trial and error, but those I would say are my three artists that have most inspired my work.
Now, we've had a lot of questions about what is your favorite kind of paper to use.
Well, this right here behind me, this is Arches paper. It's 300 pound, which means it's very heavy. It doesn't really need to be stapled down to the board. And I like to use cold press, which means it has some texture to it. It's not the really smooth or the really rough. I like some texture, so if I paint really quickly, I can leave behind those little sparkles.
Now, do you have a new series that you're working on now?
Well, I do. I have one in mind, but I haven't really been able to focus on it with the pandemic and COVID. I've been doing more self-portraits and some other, a lot of little smaller plein air paintings. I would say, though, that the bulk of my time, or a lot of my time, is connected to the foundation that I started, the Patriot Art Foundation, which was created to serve veterans and giving them a means of expression to tell their own stories through art.
Let's see here. Kathy would like to know, where do you teach? How can we learn from you?
Well, Kathy, I'd love to have you come join me in a workshop. I just came back from Maine. If you check my website, marywhyte.com, we list workshops when we can. I've done also a couple Zoom workshops during the pandemic. I expect to do a few more, but it's been a little tricky trying to schedule the workshops. So many of them have been canceled because of the pandemic. In 2 weeks, I go to LA to teach members of the National Watercolor Society, and then later in October, I'll be going to Philadelphia to teach there. So there will be classes coming up, and certainly next year, we hope when all of this comes back to normal, I'll be teaching more.
Great. Now we have time for maybe one more question. How can our viewers learn more about this series of 50 paintings, say if they can't come to the museum, for example?
Well, certainly there is the book, We the People. This was published by University of South Carolina Press, and that shows the images there. There were some short segments on you can go online. CBS Sunday Morning did a segment. SCE TV did a segment. I think NPR recorded some. So there are some outlets that you can learn a little bit more about this exhibition. But right now, it's still at the Huntsville Museum of Art, and this will be the last weekend. So I hope you can get there before it closes. And up next, it'll be going to Washington, the Washington, D.C. area, to the National Museum of the Marine Corps, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., and it'll be there for 8 months. So I hope that you all can get to see it.
Well, excellent. Well, go. Thank you so much, Mary. This has been fantastic. I know that so many people have got so many questions. I hope that we've answered quite a bit of them for folks. I also wanted to let folks know that if you did not get some of your answers or catch some of the items in detail that Mary was talking about, the museum will have this as a recorded program that will be going up on YouTube. You can search for that under Mary Whyte at Huntsville Museum of Art on YouTube, and you should be able to find that in a couple of weeks. It takes us a little bit of time to get these YouTube videos posted up, but it'll definitely be well worth it. You can relive this program then. So again, Mary, thank you so much for this insightful talk and tour. Thanks to everyone who signed up for today's session. This has been a blockbuster, record number of people who signed up and attended. We really thank you for being here.
Well,
and be
David,
sure to join us.
Thank you, David. And thank you, David. I really want to thank you and Catherine and Julie and Laura and all the docents and security guards there at the museum. You've been fantastic putting up this exhibition, and special thank you to my manager, Sharon Crawford. But I really, most of all, I want to thank be sure that I thank the veterans, that all of them that I got to meet, that were so wonderful to let me into their homes and hearts and to portray them as I did. So thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you again, everyone. Again, be sure to join us on Friday, October 15th, when we will talk with abstract painter Rocio Rodriguez. Rocio will share her behind the scenes aspects of her practice along with a tour of her studio. Her work is included in the current exhibition From the Mind's Eye, non-representational art from the permanent collection. And you can sign up for that session now by visiting the museum's website at www.hsvmuseum.org. In the meantime, come and see We the People, which will be ending on Sunday. So you've got one weekend to come and see this fantastic exhibition before it closes. It's not to be missed. So again, thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Mary.
Bye-bye.